Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.
Since 1911, the Pierre Parts Store has been your one-stop shop. Family owned and operated for 4 generations, the Pierre Parts Store has served the community by providing groceries, hardware, home products, and much more, including a full-service lumber yard. Now, we've added the Thibodaux store to the family with the same values and service we've delivered for over 100 years. The Pierre Parts Store and the Thibodaux store, our family serving your family.
The first question we have is, what piece of legislation has passed that you are the most proud of in this session?
I'm most proud of direct action. I filed a mirror bill with Chairman Jack McFarland. It's called the No Right of Direct Action State, and this is an insurance deal where what we really looked at is where we were outliers, where we were one of two, one of two, one of 3 states, and why do we still do it that way? And this is one of those pieces of legislation. It was actually Chairman McFarland's. It was the same bill that got all the way through the process, but I helped him and we worked together on the same bill. And basically what this bill does is it takes the name of your insurance company out of a lawsuit. There was a study done that when you name the insurance company, it could lead up to 25% more payout. You know, and these juries, they may think they're sticking it to the insurance company, but at the end of the day, it's going to fall back on the consumer. So I think I'm most proud of that one, and I'm proud of the insurance reform we were able to tackle on the property and auto side this session.
It is. I just don't have one favorite bill. I got a couple of important ones. The first one is the first bill I passed, and the governor's going to sign it into law, is you must be a U.S. citizen in the state of Louisiana to be able to register to vote. And you wouldn't believe how tough that was to get through. Because everybody said it was in the Constitution, but with the judges we got today, they tend to say we want to interpret the Constitution different, and it needs to be in law. So that was my game, is to make sure we got it in law in the state of Louisiana. The next one was, we got a lot of technology going on in our district, and so I created what we call the vertiports. Vertiports are aircraft that take off vertically. And with all the drones and everything that we're doing here in Terrebonne and Lafourche, it's an important thing, because now the Department of Transportation had developed a multimodal commerce. And so in that, we included vertiports. And then by doing that, I created the Vertiport Development Fund. That way we can bring down federal funding to be the earliest and the strongest in the vertiport industry. And the second one was more to do with our health, that I felt important to our area, and it was, I put it under seafood safety. We don't realize the seafood that we're importing and the contaminants that are in it. So working with the delegation, we've had a number of bills between Senator Connick, Representative Domingue, and Representative Kerner, and this bill here. In my bill, we separate imported seafood from domestic. That way we can test imported more and get the public to understand how important it is to eat domestic seafood versus the imported. The next thing is I got with the governor and the lieutenant governor, and we're gonna do a advertisement that Louisiana will have the safest seafood in the country, because our country only tests about 1% of imported seafood, whereas Europe tests 50%. So their business plan is they don't care if they lose 1%, they just send us everything they got that's left over, and that's what we're eating in our restaurants. So I thought that was important that we separate that. But that was the three main things I thought was important to do. Thank you.
What legislation am I most proud of? It's a bill that I've worked on. The most I've ever had to work on. It deals with revamping our tax sales structure, the way we collect property taxes, not sales taxes. So right now, the way we have it in Louisiana, one is subject to being unconstitutional based on a case out of I think Ohio, and it deals with undue taking when you fail to pay your taxes, and someone might just purchase that property at tax sale for only $2,000 or $1,500 for a $150,000 home, and next thing you know, they may have $10,000 into it. They can go ahead and get a judgment and get ownership of that property, of your property, for a very small fraction of the value of it. One of the problems that creates, that's got constitutional problems under our Constitution. It leads to bad titles for the people who are trying to acquire, where somebody doesn't want to pay their taxes on their property, and they don't care if it goes to tax sales. So someone wants to try to get it into commerce. So what we're doing is we're changing it to a lien system, which I think will be able to protect the consumers and protect your property rights, as well as to make sure that if someone goes and finally takes that lien certificate and turns it into a judgment and forecloses on it, that everybody gets notice and will have clear title. I worked, just a little bit of portion of the bill that I worked on was 100 times more than I worked on any other legislation in my 12+ years, plus all the different people that work together with it. We work with the Department of Revenue, we work with the sheriffs, with the assessors, with local government, the Police Jury Association, the Municipal Association, the Land Title Association. We work with vendors and investors and consumer groups. So I think that's going to be it also has a companion constitutional amendment which will be on the ballot in December. So that is the biggest change, and we'll be hearing more about it, but it's amazing to see how much work can go into a legislation when you're really having to change something the way we've done this now for, I think, almost 20 years in Louisiana. But we've got to fix it, and that's why I took the task on, and that was the tax sales legislation, so we can convert to a lien system, which again is better for the property rights, better for consumers, and will be able to help clear titles that we have in our communities. So thank you.
This was a fun question because it was actually hard, because there were so many bills this session and so many good bills, and I agree with the ones that have been mentioned so far. For me to settle on one, I'll just throw out a few that I had to look through first. First of all, a lot of elections bills. One that prevents foreign adversaries from owning and controlling agricultural land in Louisiana. A couple of bills that protect students from being required to get a COVID shot, or that protect students from being discriminated against based on their vaccine status. That was mine, by the way. There was a Campus Free Speech Act that I love, but, and also don't forget the Let Teachers Teach Act, which was really great. Maybe I'll get to tell you more about that after a while. But to settle on one that stands out, I chose the Women's Safety and Protection Act. The bill actually puts a definition of male and female into state statute, and it's a common sense definition. It's a traditional definition, and I believe it very much reflects the values of Louisiana's people. And so what does that mean to business and industry? Well, that means that you can have a men's room and a women's room, a men's bathroom and a ladies' bathroom, and you won't get sued because you have a men's bathroom and a ladies' bathroom. But if you want to, you can also have a third bathroom that could be for family or designated however you please. So it takes that question off the table. But it's one of those things where you think our founding fathers would be shocked if they knew some of the things that we have to put into legislation these days. I don't think our founding fathers ever saw a day coming where we would have new terms like birthing person. To me, that bill stands out. And as I pass the mic on, I just want to let y'all know that this has been a wonderful year. We've been through 3 legislative sessions, and the atmosphere has changed. I believe that we're doing a lot of good moving forward. I expect really great things. And for those of you who were here last year, I'll just do a little visual demonstration to show you how well things are. See? We have worked together well as a delegation, and while we heard a moment ago that we met religiously but not on Sunday, the whole House delegation over here said, we met on Sunday, and I'll pass the mic.
Look, when it comes to being proud in legislation, I want you to know that every person at these tables are Republicans. In passing legislation under Governor Jeff Landry, that's an initiative of a conservative group, is like taking candy from a baby. So when you want to be proud, a piece of legislation, as it pertains to this session, I think we got some work to go. Get a lot of emails, get a lot of messages, but when I can walk in Rouse's at 9 o'clock at night and someone thanks me because their insurance went lower or got lower, I think that'd be a time for us to be proud. I'm not sure we're there yet. I don't know if we've done enough. We certainly didn't do enough in tort reform, but we've done some insurance work. But with all that said, when Governor Landry ran for office, he spoke about the crime initiatives across this state. I can tell you that 43, 44, 45 years running, we've been some of the most deadliest places to live in America, right here in the state of Louisiana. Out of 144 legislators, there were 6 of us chosen to lead the way in the criminal justice reform, to look at those initiatives in 2017 that were successful and those that were not. We drove the train. I could tell you that 2 years ago, if you were sentenced to 10 years in prison for a nonviolent offense, you'd be lucky if you served 24 months. Under some new legislation and truth of sentence, and I can assure you that person is going to serve 85% of their sentence. There's no more questions involved. We took some dollars. You can't ask the criminal justice system to step up and do things without funding them. You'll hear throughout this talk that we moved about $711 million out of revenue stabilization into good projects, not pet projects, roads, infrastructure, water, and criminal justice. We landed at about $154 million for criminal justice initiatives that sheriffs and law enforcement professionals will begin to start being able to apply for. So those are the important things that are me, and what's unique about all these people is that each one of us come from a different walk of life and share such different views to be on the same team and focus on such vast changes in legislation. But if I had to tell you one thing that I'm proud of, it has nothing to do with a bill that I passed. It's an amendment that I put on every single bill that comes in front of my municipal committee. So in municipal, that Rep. Domain and I serve on, we create taxing bodies. Hundreds of taxing bodies, from economic development taxing bodies to fire districts. We create taxing bodies that we allow them to go to you and ask to pass a millage. So since I have been there, every single taxing body that has been proposed and I voted to say yes, I have amended it to say they can no longer tax you on off-election days. They can only propose their millage increase proposals to you on general elections, which is presidential elections, and gubernatorial elections. The success is of all those bodies, more than 70% have failed when they tried. That tells you that people are passing taxes on you and I when the majority of us do not agree. So I always stand with that, and believe it or not, it gets pretty bipartisan support now. People know Fontenot's going to put this amendment on. I can only have an election in November or December. So I think that's some of the important issues. Again, thank you for allowing us to be here.
Thank you again for having us. Thank you to the Terrebonne and the Lafourche Chambers for putting this on and putting on one event so that we could all be here together. As a freshman in this delegation, I am honored to be sitting up here with my colleagues. It has been quite a roller coaster and quite a learning curve coming from chairwoman of the Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government to turning around and being on the state legislature. And so we've got a great team, and I have some great mentors up here. Fontenot is actually my true mentor for this year, and so he's done a great job of leading me in the right direction and asking or answering the even silly questions that I have on a day-to-day basis. So I really appreciate your leadership, Rep. Fontenot. So there's so much that we're proud of, and there's so much that came out. As they've said before, we were inaugurated in January. We went right to work on crime. We went right to work on redistricting, and then we went right to work in a regular session. So there hasn't been much rest for us. But of course, we love what we do and we love being here. One of the bills that I'm most proud of, and I took it easy on myself this year. I ran 4 bills, and I've had 3 signed by the governor. One's awaiting governor's signature. So I think that's pretty good success rate for a little freshman. But I really wanted to learn the process this year. But one that I'm most proud of, and Big Mike Fessy had kind of mentioned, and we worked on this together, was HB 748, and this was pertaining to seafood safety and the testing of imported seafood. And we did a lot of work with the Lieutenant Governor's office. We did a lot of work with Mike Strain's office, with LDH. And what my bill does is we're taking the testing away from LDH and we're putting it under the Department of Ag in coalition with the Seafood Marketing Board with Lieutenant Governor's office. The reason for this is Billy Nungesser's office is already receiving the complaints. So the shrimpers don't call LDH, they call Billy Nungesser. Why? Because he's the Seafood Marketing Promotion Board. And so he's receiving about 2,500 complaints a year, and then he sends it to LDH, and LDH just doesn't have the capacity to do the testing. And so what we've done by reorganizing things is we're actually giving it to the Department of Ag, who has the equipment and has the ability to do the testing. What we're also did, and I'm very, very proud of, we haven't increased fees for testing in the state of Louisiana over 25 years. So we had a fee that was $100, and with a lot of work and a lot of push, we got that fee up to $1,000. And so that's a big win. It's a big win for the fishermen in our industry, and it's a big win for all the fishing industry in our areas, because we'll actually see some results there. We did some legislation on labeling, and we did some other legislation that's going to help support those fishermen. And so I know for me that was one of the biggest things coming from District 53 and representing the entire coast of Terrebonne Parish, is that fishing industry. While we were working on that, I was also on Commerce, and I was on House and Governmental. In Commerce, we did a lot of work on economic development. We did a lot to reduce some of the occupational licensing that we have in the state of Louisiana. We're probably one of the most licensed states in the state of Louisiana. And so if you guys don't know, we have licenses for hair braiding, and we have licensing for cosmetology, and we have licensing for anything you can possibly think of. And so we did a lot to either reduce or eliminating some of those licenses, and we are going to continue doing that as well. We also recreated the Department of Economic Development, and so this is very much a pro-business legislation, and so we're going to make sure that we continue that work in the future. Another bill that was kind of neat that I was really proud of was Rep. Kim Carver's bill, HB 577, and it actually prohibits social media companies from collecting data and for the use of targeting minors. So if you are a minor, 18 years or younger, those social media companies can no longer use that data to sell products to you. And so that was a really big win for us. It was a really big win for the state of Louisiana, and we're one of the first states to push that over the edge. And so I was very proud of my colleague for getting that one over the finish line. In House of Governmental was probably one of the busiest work committees that we had. We listened to HB 800, so if you guys aren't familiar with HB 800, that was our Constitutional Convention bill. I think I sat through 20 hours of testimony on our Constitutional Convention, and I know we're going to discuss that a little bit later. I still see a path forward. I still see a way that we can make the Constitutional Convention work, even if it's a limited Constitutional Convention. I'm committed, and I've told our governor that I'm committed to we said a refresh, a constitutional refresh, and so I'm committed to refreshing our Constitution and modernizing the state of Louisiana for the people of the state. So we'll be interested to see where that comes in the summer months. We also did a lot about election integrity. I know we all heard a lot about election integrity in the past few years, whether nationally or on the state level. And Louisiana does a really good job as far as our elections and as far as keeping our elections safe. We did a lot about mail-in ballots and about absentee ballots, and we just strengthened our laws as far as that's concerned. I was able to bring a law, and it was signed by the by the governor regarding campaign finance. We didn't have any clear rules as far as campaign finance laws. If there's a tie in an election, and we did have a tie this past year, and so I was able to carry that bill, and I was very proud that the governor signed it. So for me, it was a very fun year. I learned a lot. I'm not sure if we will ever have a year quite like 2024, and it's not over yet, but it was very exciting, and I am very honored to be up here with all of my colleagues because they all in every way taught me something different. So thank you so much.
As the Bayou region, we have a great group of legislators. We work well together, as has said before. For me, 3 years in the making, my most proud bill would probably be a pair, HB 300 and 305. And that is to, as Louisiana, some say transition, Port Fourchon says energy addition, as we continue to add energy formats into our portfolio of the all of the above energy strategy, as we hopefully regain energy dominance in America. Any new energy formats that come to the offshore outer continental shelf. Right now, will be paired with what we have now, which is oil and gas activity revenues, get immediately dedicated to coastal restoration funds. To be able to build up the coast, the communities that basically provide the labor, sweat, tears that basically work offshore and fuel our nation. Any new energy sources, whether it be offshore wind, solar, wave, tidal, whatever it is, if it's energy generated offshore, the revenue that the state will receive from it should be married with the oil and gas that we already dedicate. And on November 5th, there should be a constitutional amendment that'll be on the ballot that'll put that dedication to the citizens of Louisiana. And I say it's 3 years in the making because the last 2 years I've gotten it through the House, and whenever I would get to the Senate, I would run against what I call my dry foot legislators, the people from northern Louisiana who think we already get too much money for coastal restoration. And basically trying to convince them that all the energy that we generate from offshore is done by the communities that are on the coast, and they need to be protected. So representing District 54, which is, of course, Grand Isle, Lower Central Lafourche, and Pointe-aux-Cheyennes, I have residents in the Morganza to Gulf levee system, Terrebonne levee system, the North Lafourche levee system, and the South Lafourche levee system, and of course Grand Isle. So making sure that coastal restoration efforts are done, and we continue to fund them. Right now they're primarily being funded from BP oil spill fines, but that will eventually drop off. And then Go Mesa, the monies from oil and gas revenue will be able to take over, and having as much complementary money into that fund as possible from any new energy sources is important. And later next week, or in the middle of next week, I'm going to be doing a fly-in to Washington, D.C. called the SHORES Fly-In. It stands for Sharing Offshore Revenue of Energy, All Energy Sources. And that's basically to petition the legislators, the congressmen from the rest of the nation on how important it is that coastal states get to share in the revenues of the energies that are produced offshore. And I hope to make some progress in working with our Louisiana federal delegation, who have instruments right now in play called the BREEZE Act and the RISE Act. And what those are meant to do is basically remove the cap, because right now the amount of money that we could get, if we really have a change later in the year and we reopen the Gulf of Mexico to large increases in oil and gas production, production and exploration. The amount of money that Louisiana and the local parishes, coastal parishes can get is capped. And the federal legislation that's being proposed by House Majority Leader Scalise and Senator Cassidy would basically work to remove the cap, roll in all the renewable energy monies that could also be done, and that would help Louisiana in basically revitalizing our coast and our communities. And that's the one I'm probably most proud of. Other than that, I think the election integrity bills were, I think we batted 1,000. I think Nancy Landry had 11 bills and we passed all 11. Tim Temple on insurance reform, not batting 1,000. I'd say batting 600 or 700, something like that. You know, 3 or 4 times in the Capitol, I told them, I said, you know, a stool with only 2 legs doesn't stand up too well. We need to get that legal reform done. But that was a little bit more difficult push, and we'll keep working on it. But besides that, I'm really proud to be up here and be with these great people that I work with. And thank you all very much.
Thank you all for having us here. Appreciate the opportunity. And again, just to reiterate what Joe was saying, how important this bill that's passed is, you know, Go Mesa and the other dollars that are so important to advancing our efforts to protect and restore our coast. We're going to run out of money if we don't continue to look for other ways, especially we talk about some of the things we're proud of. I'll start off with one of the biggest disappointments, unfortunately, this session is the fact that we were unable to get significant dollars to coastal protection, right? Coastal protection. CPRA only got $10 million, and there was hardly any for Morgans to the Gulf. But we're going to continue to work and try to address that. But on a positive note, there were a lot of things that were accomplished in regard to the budget. And one of the things I'm proud of, I said on appropriations too, in terms of limiting the growth of government. It's always kind of the benchmark. If you can keep growth of government less than 3%, you're pretty much doing pretty good. Well, it's right around 2.1%, which is pretty good. We are spending less, but a lot of it is attributed to the fact that we don't have as much federal dollars. We're getting off of that COVID federal push that we had, and those dollars are not as available. And rightfully so, we need to make sure we get back our economy growing, and those are some of the things and initiatives that we were able to implement this session. In regard to the money that, in addition to what Representative Fontenot talked about, the revenue stabilization dollars are then going to be redirected to positive projects for infrastructure. Some of the things, too, that we did, and I see Dr. Clunes here at Nichols, putting over $94 million to deferred maintenance for universities. I mean, there's a significant backlog of dollars that need to go to address infrastructure issues within the universities, and I think that's going to help. In addition to looking at a lot of the things that we did for education, early childhood education was important. Unfortunately, the teacher is a stipend again. It's not a pay raise. We need to continue to address that. But I think we've demonstrated our commitment to improving education, and I think Secretary Brumley is doing a great job, and those numbers are paying off in terms of our score and what from K through 12 and what we're doing in higher education in our community college system, the benefits that it's having to the people because of the investments we've made at the legislature. Some of the other things that I think are important from the local level that I'm proud of, and I heard that you mentioned Annette Fontana's here. We passed a bill that is going to have an electronic filing system for the court system across the judicial. It's going to be a significant improvement for the effectiveness and efficiency within the judicial system of Louisiana. On the local level, also working on trying to provide money for the 911 system that is going to have a significant impact and benefit, not just for 911, but for police and firemen here in the region, and also in support of what Senator Feasey was talking about in regard to the airport and trying to address some of the changes that they're making, is looking at the improvements that we have, and we're also going to put a police system and actually an enforcement system within the airport that's going to provide them the necessary response opportunities to be available for the upgrades that the airport is trying to implement. So I think there's a lot of things that we were able to accomplish. I know we want to give some time for questions, but again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and also the delegation working together, and we're doing the best we can, and I think it's paying off.
I'd like to get someone to elaborate just a little bit more on your thoughts on the scope of the Constitutional Convention, along with what part of holding a Constitutional Convention do you feel can most directly benefit the residents of Louisiana?
What was proposed by the governor, the House did pass a bill, HB 800, to move us into a constitutional convention. We haven't had a convention since 1973, and there were two people from Lafourche and Terrebonne Parish that served as delegates. Those are Mr. Boise Bollinger and old man Judge Lanier. So if you want to understand what were they thinking in 73, passed in 74, you got to sit and talk with them. And they would tell you that they believe that the 200 plus amendments that the people voted for was never a vision for them, that they thought that the Constitution would be so simply changed. Governor Landry threw a proposal that said we weren't going to change the Constitution. We were going to look at sections 7, 8, and 9, which deals with a lot of issues about taxes, and we would subsequently move those constitutional amendments into statute that would take a 2/3 vote of both chambers to change. The problem is that the Louisiana Constitution today does not specifically say you can be into a limited constitution. Anytime we invoke ourselves into a convention, a lot of things come on the table. And you open the door for a lot of social issues that Democrats are prepared to bring forward that we may or may not want to debate. I think you'll see us back in the Capitol in 6 to 8 weeks to start having preliminary discussions about a constitutional convention that I support. I do not think it will be limited. I think it will be a full scope constitution. But you say, what do you want changed? This is a huge risk. I want to be real clear. This is a huge risk to this Bayou delegation. Watercraft taxation, inventory tax. Now, Governor Landry's agreed to pay the locals. I'm going to give you back the money. But this book is the Bible across America about taxes. And where does Louisiana rank in taxes? One of those initiatives in a convention that we have to address is sales taxes, who collects them and who pays them. In this book, it ranks Louisiana as dead last in sales taxes, the highest sales tax collection in America. That's not because we don't collect enough money. Here's the problem. People don't pay. Farmers don't pay, government doesn't pay, feminine products doesn't pay. The list of people who don't pay sales taxes equates in the thousands of items you can't pay. If you buy groceries and it goes on offshore, you don't pay taxes. To collect the exact same amount today, in the billions, the exact same amount, if we done away with every one of those exemptions, Louisiana's sales tax would go down by 200%. So your taxes could go down if everybody paid. It's about sharing the burden and sharing the wealth. I think we get into a convention, that is an initiative that we look at. There's no way we go into a constitutional convention and Z Zarang and I don't look at judges. And the amount of judges we have in this state are disproportionate to other states. They don't like it, that's a fact. We have 400,000 less people than the state of Mississippi. They have 15 appellate court judges. We have 51, 53. We got judges in Lafourche and Terrebonne, they can't keep up. And we got judges in East Carroll, Tensar, and Madison that's shooting a golf ball every day, and they're making the same amount of money. We have to rebalance judges, and we have to direct those funds into judicial programs that work, Veterans Court, drug courts. That's the things you don't hear about a constitutional convention. That's the thing the TV doesn't put on a commercial. Believe you me, there's a lot of backdoor discussions, and the Senate will tell you, I'm sure one of them is going to talk now, we didn't really have clear direction from Governor Landry as to what he wanted to accomplish. And that was a concern for them why they didn't pass it. But for me, I think the convention is going to open up, and you're going to see some serious tax reform initiatives that could benefit us, but rest assured, it could certainly hurt this parish, Lafourche and Terrebonne, as it pertains to inventory and watercraft taxation.
You know, clearly our Constitution, it's easily amended. You know, each year I had my constitutional amendment dealing with tax sales has to be put on the December ballot because the Secretary of State says our machines don't have room for more than 8 on any one election date. So I think that means that we're going to have eight measures on the ballot in November. So we certainly need to address our Constitution and things such as such as our tax system, such as the fact that even though we have the highest combined sales tax in the nation, we do not collect it efficiently. So there's a lot of money those of us that are paying taxes, your brick and mortar businesses, are paying a disproportionate amount, and the ones that are remote sellers are not really having to pay. You know, you can go online and still not have to pay sales tax for a lot of your purchases. So there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and Representative Fontenot did certainly address one of the concerns, especially in St. Charles Parish, where inventory tax is a significant part of our property tax income. The question is, how do we make that up for it? We're not going to trust that the state is going to budget and make us whole. They might do it for a year or two, or maybe for 5 years, but pretty soon we'll be just like the teachers, maybe depending on a stipend. So my other concern is we did not get on this accelerated schedule that they want us to have. They wanted us to start the last 10 days of May, while we're still dealing with session. Our staff is dealing with conference committee reports, amendments, bills. We may not have been having committee meetings, except for Senate Governmental Affairs, which I think we met until the last day of the session. We were busy trying to take care of what we came in March to do. So that was just a non-starter for us. Plus, we had been in session pretty much since January with the 2 special sessions and organizational session. So we never got a clear picture of what we were going to actually change. But I'll give you an example of something, and it was touched on. It's the local authority. They come to us, that locals have to come to us for almost every little change. And we rubber stamp pretty much if you've got all your letters of support from your mayor and your parish president, your council members, we're not going to fight back what your locals want to do. But things such as Representative Fontenot talked about making sure these local taxing bodies have to bring up the taxing, the new tax elections on the date of the general elections, that can be put in the Constitution. But for us to micromanage what locals do, perfect example is, for the last several years, there have been legislation, local bills to pull their local housing authority employees out of civil service because of the inability to attract employees at those levels of pay. I brought a bill this year that basically said you do not have to come with your individual local civil service authority to ask for permission from the legislature and the governor to pull out. So we have the governor sign that bill into law. So we won't have to have locals come, because we had voted for, I think there were 4 or 5 of those bills just this year. And so we shouldn't have to be dealing with those type of issues, and a lot of issues dealing with the way local government and state government interact, as well as the tax, the way our tax structure is, can be addressed. So,
population migration in the United States. We know a lot of people are leaving New York and California and moving to places like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, places where there's no or low income tax. It's always been a drive I'm on the Ways and Means Committee to try to make Louisiana more competitive. So I'm hoping that in the Constitutional Convention, what Representative Fontenot talked about, I wrote down zero liability citizens. We still have people that for certain services pay no taxes, and changing that might be a part of the Constitutional Convention. I know he mentioned, Senator Miller mentioned how St. Charles relies on the inventory tax with all the refineries and the products on the river, and Lafourche Parish, of course, relies equally but in a same disproportionate manner on watercraft taxation. And I kind of got cross-threaded with some of my locals thinking that I wanted to get rid of the watercraft tax and put the parish in a bind, where in fact what I was doing was reading the tea leaves in Washington about the desire to change the total landscape of Louisiana, and I was just looking for a way to kind of wean ourselves off of it over time. I just think that's what we kind of need to change, is I call it state-sponsored local government welfare. The way that y'all send us up there to go get money for local governments, we need to facilitate a way where the individual local governments get to keep more of the money locally and manage the problems. One thing I've said to constituents is, please, with all the problems with bridges and cutting grass on the side of the road and everything else, all the minor things, it's always been keep as much local as you can. For me, something that could be solved in 1 week in the town of Golden Meadow could be solved in a month at the parish level, which takes usually almost a year to solve at the state, and probably 5 or 10 years in Washington. So keep as much local government, keep as much government as local as possible. And I'm hoping that the Constitutional Convention, when it comes on, will have that sort of focus. I'll just close by saying one last thing. The Sunday after Governor Landry was elected, I started a list of things to discuss with Governor Landry whenever I got my one-on-one, and Louisiana Constitutional Convention was one of the things on that list. I just didn't know that it would be in our first session, in the honeymoon period, that we had tried to pass it. So it was an idea for later to be done, but we all know it needs to be done. I just think the temperature wasn't to try to get it done this quickly.
And let me start off by saying I'm of the mindset that I believe that we can do a limited constitutional convention in much the same way that the legislature does a limited session. Whenever we call ourselves or we're called into a special session, the session is limited to the topics issued in the call. So I believe that we can and we should have a constitutional convention that's limited. I don't know that we need to open the entire Constitution up to a complete rewrite. I'm not a fan of that, but the one thing that I would like to see changed in the Constitution is the makeup of the Constitution. I believe it does need an overhaul as far as the way things are organized. Many of you have businesses and other organizations, maybe nonprofits, where you've written a constitution and bylaws for your organization or your business. You know that certain things belong in the Constitution, those are foundational, those should rarely change, and the rest belongs in the bylaws, which for the state laws, that would be the statutes. That's the way it should be. Unfortunately, in Louisiana, we amend our Constitution all the time, virtually every year, over and over again, and I think it's because our current Constitution has a lot more in it than just the foundational things that should rarely change. That's what needs to change. Right now, the way the Constitution is designed, so much of our budget is locked up so that the legislature cannot move things around when we need to. And just for one example, I hear that we have about $9 billion sitting in various funds, So the way we do everything in special funds, we really can't move that around. We can't touch that. It's locked up in a fund. And so just like we need to do away with so many tax exemptions because we don't have a level playing field, because there are so many entities that don't pay taxes at all, which makes the burden bigger on the rest of us. We also have so much money locked up in funds that we can't move it around when we need to. And so the other thing that makes it a problem, the way our Constitution is arranged, is what you've heard from my colleagues so far about how locals have to go to Baton Rouge to do anything. For the budget, they have to come to Baton Rouge to get their money. To be able to function, they have to come to Baton Rouge for permission to do things that the local governments really should have the authority to decide on their own. So those are my thoughts, and that's what I'd like to see done whenever we do look at our Constitution.
I agree with Representative Amadei. I think we could do a limited call, which would give us a little more protection as far as not getting into something maybe we didn't want to get into. 89% of our money is locked away. Before we start session, we're trying to fix all of these issues with 11%. You couldn't give me a business where I could only control 11%. I think we really need to go in limited, identify the things we can change, but we've got to free up the way we can move money around. It would give the legislature a more adaptive approach to be able to pivot when we have natural disasters, when we have, hopefully never again a pandemic. But these things are locked away and have been statutorily dedicated for so long. And to Representative Amade's point, there is a ton of money that's sitting in these funds. I know in my district we have, not only an insurance crisis on the property and the home, but our bridges are out. Just the deferred maintenance, the backlog, how many billion does DOTD have backlog? It's a ridiculous amount of money, and we deserve to be, we pay enough in taxes, and we deserve to be riding on decent roads and crossing our own bridges. So I'm in full support of a constitutional convention to get those things fixed.
And I feel the same way. I don't want to repeat everything they've said. It's been pretty repetitious on how we feel, but the biggest thing is the Senate didn't push this through because we were asking for a list of exact things we would do to the Constitution, and that was the important fact, is that we don't want to open it up to something that we may be sorry for. So I'm for a limited, going into the Constitution on a limited basis to know what we're going to fix and make sure we can fix those and fix them right. Thank you.
Just a couple things in the Constitutional Convention. Again, we've been talking about this. I was first elected in 2015 and 2016. They've been talking about having them. Fully supported every effort to try to do that. The fact of the matter is we also have to understand that, I appreciate the fact that we wanted a limited constitutional convention, but the fact of the matter is once you call it, it's open, and anything is open. And I think honestly we would, if it is specific to Article 7, which is dealing with the financial aspect of the state, we could limit it to that. The challenge is can we do it in 2 weeks or as limited time as was expressed? But the more important thing is ultimately this has to go before the people. And is the people going to trust the fact that what we've changed is worthy of being passed and voted on, and if it's going to make a significant difference? The problem we have right now, the dedications are both constitutional, statutory dedications, and when the budget is finalized and we start allocating dollars from the revenue that we've generated, first things that come off the top are those dedications, statutory and constitutional dedications. Before we start putting it to roads, bridges, and everything else, those dedications get paid. So there's no doubt that we need to address the limitations that we do have in the state budget. When you look at the overall budget of the $10 billion that we generate, our budget's over $40 billion when you factor in federal and state, but the state revenue that we generate is around $10 billion. But when you take statutory dedications and constitutional dedications, put that aside, what we as legislators have the ability to say grace over is roughly around $4 billion, less than half. And those are a result of those dedications. So we do have to address them. Can it be done in that short period of time? I don't know, and limiting it would be the critical factor to establish that trust that I think is going to be needed to get the support of the people.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford & Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.